So the very first topic that we're going to be covering here is obviously the traceability, which kind of focuses around that serialization and lock control that we talked about on the prior slide. Obviously, as a medical device manufacturer, a key component inside of your process is being able to very quickly and easily understand where a product has gone or where it is within your supply chain life cycle. And so that means a couple of different components that need to be basically identified and correlated as part of that process. More specifically, understanding the serialization of raw components along with finished goods, and how do you set that up within the ERP system to track that information? How do you track lot numbers for different types of products then that have lot enablement that then eventually could be involved inside of some product that's being produced that you need to be able to trace down to the actual finished good product that was shipped to the end customer? And how do you adapt this as well? There's been many medical device manufacturers that I've been at that have different requirements as to when a serial number needs to be generated for a device. Sometimes they have materials that are coming inbound that they don't want to generate a serial number for until they've actually sold that particular device. So depending upon the regulations that you have within your medical device supply chain, that's where you can actually go through and define this information and set that up within the Business Central solution. And then lastly, how do we check that device history? So the device may be going to a patient. It may be going, for example, in the demos that we're doing today, we're focusing on hearing aids, which usually go to audiologists. How do you track the patient or end user information or the warranty information that's related to that device so that you can quickly and easily get to that data? So for traceability, what we're going to do is we're going to do a software presentation just to go through the depth and the breadth of the actual traceability functionality inside of Business Central. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over into my Business Manager Role Center. So this is Dynamics 365 Business Central. And the role that I've been assigned is basically a business manager. And what I'm going to be doing here is highlighting a couple of the setups and then some of the transactions that end users would typically do as part of the setup and processing of a serialized or lot number based part. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the traceability aspect of this as well. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go into our items. And when I click on items, we're going to have a list of items that are going to show up that I can interact with within the system. Dynamics allows for a lot of different configurations to be established for items, meaning different layouts, different looks and feel, and allows you to very quickly and easily switch between these list views as you see fit and as part of your implementation process. Looking at this hearing aid right here, this is the product that we are actually going to be selling as part of the process. So if I take a look at this particular product and we get to the details of that product, this is where we go through and do some of the setup that's related to it. Now, obviously on a webinar, we're not going to get into a lot of detail about the setup because number one, I don't want to bore you, but I do want to go through a couple of areas that are critical to understand how we actually then track serial numbers and lot numbers inside of the Business Central solution. So looking at this hearing aid, if I go down into my actual item tracking area, item tracking is what we use to really define how you actually want to track a particular product. Are you tracking it with lot numbers or are you tracking it with serial numbers? So for an example, with this particular hearing aid, we can see that we have a serial number or a code that gets established for that particular serial number, and we have a specific way of tracking that particular product inside of the system. And if we take a quick look at this, so if I look at my serial number or serial number specific tracking from here and click on the select from full list to get to those details, what I can see here is that there's a configuration that can really drive how you want to actually see that serial number information and when it's actually required as part of the business process. So the examples of this is, number one, when I went through and created this item tracking code, I defined that this is actually a specific tracking or serial number specific tracking item, which means that when I purchase it, when I sell it, or when I adjust it as part of the transactions inside of Business Central, it's going to prompt or require me to enter a serial number. And the reason I usually highlight this actual setup inside of Business Central is that, like we said before, there are some medical device environments where you do not need a serial number until a specific type of transaction, such as a sale to a customer. Maybe that's when you actually have to have a serial number. Or maybe you do require the serial number because that component may be used on a device that needs to be tracked as part of your tracing capabilities. This is where you can go through and define this information. So for this particular product, when we're going through and selling it and actually going through and processing it, we're going to assign a serial number to then go through that transaction or that process. Secondarily, I wanted to highlight one other part that's on here. And so as part of the hearing aid, we have a bunch of components that we use to build this. And one of those components is a glue component that we use. And with that glue, we decided that we want to track that from a lot number capability as opposed to an actual serial number capability. And you can see, once again, I can specify my item tracking code of lot all, which, as you probably already have guessed, is going to be lot-specific tracking, which means then that those same options exist on how you want to track lot number information inside of your environment. Another common word for lot is batch. So if you have batch numbers that you want to track, you can also use that type of terminology to drive that. Secondarily, on lot numbers, the thing to note is that you may have certain components that do have expiration dates on them. And so there is expiration calculations that you can add to a particular product. So therefore, when you receive that product, it will automatically set the shelf life date for that product and not use that product if it exceeds that particular shelf life that you've established. So enough of that. Let's go through and go do a basic transaction within Business Central. And quite honestly, I would love to be able to do a one-on-one demo with you so I can show the look and feel of the application a little bit more. We're going to be more tactical during this webinar, so I'm going to actually go through and just do the actions that we need to as part of an end user experience. So basically, I'm going to go and create a new sales order. And the very first action I'm going to click on is the plus to create a new sales order inside of the system. When I create this new sales order, what the system is doing is it's going to go through and then prompt me for additional information that I need to enter to support this particular transaction. So what's going to happen here is that we're going to see hopefully a sales order that's going to pop up that I can actually go through and interact with. So as I go through and navigate for this and click on the actual action for the sales order, we should actually hopefully here see the actual sales order information show up inside of the environment. Now, one thing to note with Business Central is that there are capabilities to go through and tailor these screens to how you feel that screen should represent in terms of the information on there. So if you want to show more or if you want to show less, it's basically just an option that you enable to go through that process. I'm going to go through and select a customer. So because we are going to be working with hearing aids, we're going to work with an audiologist or an ENT potentially. So I'm going to choose Frappier ENT, which is going to be our customer that we're selling this particular product to. And what I'm going to also do is I'm actually going to define who the patient is for this particular product. So from here, I have John Roberts already set up in my demo data. But if I wanted to add a new patient or a new contact or somebody that's related to who this device is being sold to, I could really define that as part of my sell to contacts within the Business Central environment. We have the capability to track multiple contacts that are related to one particular order. So it allows for you to really get to some detail in terms of who actually received that device and what the serial number was that they received as well. So I'm going to go ahead and then select John Roberts. I'm going to go through and change my sell to contact, but I'm not going to change my bill to contact. So now I know, for example, that Frappier ENT is who I'm going to be billing for this, but they're actually going to be using John Roberts as the actual patient in this situation. I'm going to go through and then enter in my part. So I'm going to go through and select a hearing aid. And so you can see I have a part number set up. And what ITE means is in the ear. If you've been in the hearing aid industry, there are BTEs, which are behind the ear. You've got ITC, which is in the canal. There's a whole bunch of different types and designs that you have that are related to that. But what I'm going to do here is just reflect a really basic aspect of this. So I'm going to go through and select that particular part. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say there's a specific variation of this as well. well, meaning that this is a left ear ITE hearing aid. Maybe I have a mold that I'm taking with it as well. The net result is that those variants can really drive how you actually then set up and use that particular part. I'm going to say we're going to do a quantity of 1, and what I'm also going to do is I'm going to go down to my line over here. I'm going to press the down arrow after the quantity is validated, and I'm going to actually go through and then generate another line, and of course it's going to be the right ear as part of this. So I have a left ear and a right ear hearing aid that can be generated as part of my processing. Now, a couple of things just to note here. So as we're going through and doing this, the system is actually informing me about particular product and what the available inventory is for that product. Because this is a custom product, I'm generally not going through and stocking this product or preloading serial numbers for the product. So instead, it's actually telling me that there's no available inventory, so we need to do some type of production processing against this to be able to then grab parts, build that particular product, and then assign a serial number as part of that building process based off of our setups. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to go through and release this particular product, and then I'm going to actually go through and plan it. And when I do my planning action here, this is actually going to allow me to go through and then create a production order so that someone in a work facility, someone on a flow line is very common in hearing aids, or in a work cell, can actually start the production process to be able to grab the parts, the lot numbers, and then produce the serial numbers with it. And then we're going to ship this product, and then we're going to look at the traceability with it. So I'm going to go ahead and create the production order. I'm going to create a release production order inside of our environment, and I'm going to call it a project order. And I'm going to go ahead and release that. And what the system is going to do is it's going to bind now this production order to this one particular sales order. And the beauty of that is that from an end user perspective, you can always get to the reserved quantity here if I click on it to get to the production order to see what's happening for that particular hearing aid in this example. So traceability in terms of getting down to production very quickly and easily, I can just click on it and I can see, for example, what production order this is related to very quickly and easily from my actual sales order screen. So I'm going to change roles a little bit here. So that was kind of an order entry process. There's no serial numbers that were really entered in that, but the net result is that we have to have a demand requirement to show you some of our item tracing capabilities. What I can do is I can go into my release production orders and show a list of all the production that needs to occur for a particular production order. So here we have 2 different orders. You can see I've been doing some testing as part of this to make sure it reflects accurately. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into this one specific production order, and I can see, for example, that there are 2 lines that need to be produced as part of this process. Now, there are a couple of different setups that we can use to drive how you want this automated within your medical device environment. And what I mean by that is if I click on my more options here and I click on my line and I go to my item tracking lines, if you remember, we set up an item tracking code for this particular part, but we also have item tracking lines then that are related to it. And this is where we go through and we define a serial number. And so what I can do is I can click on my item tracking lines as an example here. I can click on my actions and I can actually go through and then assign a serial number to this particular product that we're going to be producing. Now, some customers want this automated, meaning that when they actually create this release production order, they want the system to automatically generate a serial number for it. That's not a problem. It's just configuration as part of the processing. Others want some type of smart serial numbers that are involved with this, maybe a Julian date format for some reason that needs to be included inside of the serial number. We can configure that as needed to be able to reflect then that serial number information that you may have. So for now, though, let's go through and just assign both of these serial numbers so we can actually go through and do the processing. And I'm going to go to my item tracking lines, and I'm actually going to go through and assign another serial number here and click on OK to close it out. So now I have 2 serial numbers that have been assigned as part of my production process. So when I actually produce this product and it goes into inventory, those are the serial numbers it's actually going to go into inventory as. So part of the production process, though, too, is that you may have lot numbers, for example, that need need to be tracked as part of the consuming of the production process. And in order to do that, what we can do is we can actually go through the actual journal, or what we call our production journal, to register the components that we take out of inventory or consume inside of the Dynamics 365 Business Central environment, and what we actually then produce as part of that, which we call output. And those are then linked as part of the transactional processing. So let's go ahead and go to our line, and let's go to our production journal, and you can see here that we're going to have a demand requirement to consume these part numbers, these electronic components, the shell for the actual hearing aid, and then the glue to put everything together. Really basic. Obviously, you may have parts that you made back flush or forward flush. That's not part of the scope today, but know that we do support that capability. So I'm going to go through and then specify my consumption quantity. So I'm going to consume one of each of these parts as part of the process. But on my glue, I need to make sure that I specify what is the actual lot number of glue that I'm using. So the same concept exists here. What I do is I can go to my item tracking lines, I can go to my lot numbers, I can take a look at my lot number and say I want to pick this particular lot as part of the process, and then I can close that out, and now that lot number will be used when I consume that to that particular production order. So what I can do is I can go to my process, I can go ahead and post that, and now I've basically taken all those individual small components and built a hearing aid related to that particular item number. Now, a couple things just to note. You may have different routing operations that you may tackle. You may have different steps. You may have different parallel activities. Those are all features that we support as well. We're just trying to keep this as basic as possible for an introduction for you. I'm going to go ahead and leave the production journal, and we just did the left ear. Let's go ahead and do the right ear real quick. If I go to my lines and I go to my production journal, same exact steps. I go to my actual navigate, click on my lines, go ahead and select the actual lot number that I want and click on OK. Close that out and go ahead and then once again process this by posting it. That goes through and then registers the component quantity that I've consumed for that actual production order. The last thing that I would do with this is I would actually go through and change my action. I would go through and then change the status of this particular production order to finished, which means that there's no further transactions that would be posted against it. And when I finish this, based on the configuration that I have, it's going through and then automatically then creating those particular finished good part numbers with those serial numbers. So I should now be able to see serial numbers that exist in inventory for those hearing aids that we just produced. Now let's talk a little bit about the tracing then with that. So basically I'm at the front screen that we were talking about before, our role center, our business manager role center. What I can also do, if I go to my sales order as an example now, and if we take a look at those sales orders that are inside of the system, here's the actual one that we were processing inside of the environment, and we can see the actual left and right hearing aid that are here. Now, on our lines too, we can actually get to the related information of this particular product and see the actual item tracking information. So you remember on the actual order, I didn't enter in a serial number as part of the actual transactional processing. I just entered an item number, and they assigned the serial number as part of the production process. But you can see as soon as that production process occurred and the serial number was entered, that serial number synchronized back over into the actual sales order. So it's making sure to link that information as part of the processing for that serial number information. The same thing can happen with lot numbers too. So if you're producing things that are in batches and you need to track it from that perspective, it'll synchronize that from your production processing to the sales order as part of that processing. Final eventuality here is that you would actually go to your posting and post that away, and that would then ship an invoice, as we show here, ship an invoice, that particular product for the customer, and then you would generate your packing slip and all your documents that are related to it. So that's great, right? Well, now all of a sudden something bad happens. We have a potential recall, and we hope that that word never happens inside of an environment, but we need to ensure that that information is being tracked accurately. So one of the features that we have inside of the system is something called item tracing. So if I go to my item tracing capabilities inside of the solution, what I can do is I can search for a particular product and then identify where that product went as part of those shipments or part of that processing within the environment. So the example I have right here is that we have glue that for some reason just didn't bind correctly for a specific batch or lot of particular glue products that we had. So I'm going to go into my item tracing and I'm going to say, you know what, I want to look at that particular one. So it's lot 001. And so this is my lot number information. And one thing I wanted to highlight here as well is that the lot number information, you can have test quality information. If you had COAs or certificate of analysis that's related to that particular product, you can actually have the certificate number information inside of here. This is kind of a container where you can add additional fields as well that are more relevant than for your actual medical device company. So if you want to be able to track some additional key factors, quality, grades, things of that nature, you can add those fields then to this lot number information card to get to that information in the future. We know that this is the specific lot that we want to trace. We could even from this lot number click on the navigate as an example and then see all the different types of item ledger entries or comments that are related to it. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep this basic. We're going to select the lot number filter, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and then trace this particular product to see where it has been as part of the processing. So what does this show? So initially when looking at this screen, what I can tell you is that we have had basically 4 different production order lines that have consumed one quantity of this product as part of the processing. So this isn't showing me yet any of the sales portions of this. This is basically saying when you actually received that, this was from this particular vendor, so this particular purchase receipt. And what I can do is I can actually go ahead and then show the document to show exactly who the vendor was, which is Raytherm in this situation, for that particular product that we ordered. So it allows for me very quickly to see the origination of that particular lot number and what actual purchase order drove that or receipt drove that into inventory when it was then consumed on a production order. Well, we can also do some other things with this as well. So the example that I like to show is that I want to trace the opposite from the line, meaning I want to see the actual sales orders too that were impacted by this, because I may have to call those customers now and say, hey, you may need to send those particular products back so that we can do some rework with it, being more proactive instead of reactive. So if I trace opposite from line, this gives me the information then onto who has actually been shipped those particular products. So the example here, I've got a sales shipment, 2 different shipments that occurred for 2 different serial numbers, so left and right hearing aid. And the one we just did, I didn't post it, so it's just sitting in inventory. I can also see that there are products that are sitting in inventory that are actually remaining as well. So this tracing capability allows for me to go all the way back and all the way forward to identify what products were impacted as part of that processing. So it's a very powerful tool to be able to get to that information. And you can always then click on the navigate as an example and go to that actual document to see then, for example, this went to Frappier ENT and the contact was John Roberts. That was the patient that we defined as part of that processing. So a very capable and linked system that allows for you to very quickly and easily get back to that detail as needed. And then the final component with this is that in most medical device manufacturers, there is an area of service that you need to consider as well, where you may be taking products back in to be repaired or fixed as part of that processing. Dynamics 365 Business Central does support that capability as well, and we have full service management capability for dispatching if needed as well. But at a very basic level, what I just wanted to highlight here is that when we actually go through and then ship a particular product or item inside of the system, we have something that's called a service item that's actually generated as well. So that way you can actually go through and do the processing for service, for repairs of a particular product as needed. So if I click on my service items as an example, the 2 particular hearing aids that we sold and we shipped, here are the 2 examples with it. This shows me when it was sold, who it was sold to, what the actual warranty information is with it as well. So starting date on parts and also on labor. And from here, I can actually contain information in terms of notes, who the customer was, who the contact was for this particular one, what's the detail related to this in terms of what it was sold at. But these service items then allow us to track so that if there's an FDA inquiry in terms of what devices have been sold and what serial numbers are related to what customers, we can show all that information inside of here. And we can also reflect then the changes. So if you have a device that goes to a different customer as part of that, or a different patient, you can track that information as long as you're compliant in terms of the regulations that you want to track inside of the Business Central system. So at a high level, that is kind of the traceability concepts that we have within Business Central.